There are movie stars, and then there is John Wayne. For more than 50 years, he wasn't just an actor. He was a symbol, a cultural monument. He was the walking, talking embodiment of the American spirit, or at least a certain powerful and deeply enduring version of it. He was the rugged individualist, the quiet, confident lawman who brought justice to a lawless frontier. The tough, honorable soldier who fought for his country without question. The man who tamed the West. With a particular rolling walk, a particular deliberate way of speaking, and an unshakable on-screen presence, a man named Marion Morrison transformed himself into the Duke, an international icon of uncompromising masculinity and conservative American values. He was a figure so monumental, he often seemed carved out of the very rock of Monument Valley itself, a permanent fixture in the landscape of our imagination. But the man behind the myth, the man his 7 children simply called Dad, was far more complex. He was a 3-time married, hard-drinking, chain-smoking workaholic, a notoriously demanding father who was often absent shooting films for months and years on end. He was a political firebrand whose controversial views on race patriotism and politics have been intensely debated for decades. On screen, he was the ultimate American hero. But in 1991, his own daughter published a tell-all book that revealed the complicated, controlling, and sometimes heartbreaking reality of being raised by the man they called the Duke. What is the true story of John Wayne's 7 children? In this video, we will tell the complete, sprawling, and often contradictory stories of all 7 of John Wayne's children from his 2 most significant families. They were the heirs to one of the most powerful and enduring legacies in Hollywood. A legacy of rugged individualism, fierce patriotism, and uncompromising masculinity. Each of them had to find their own way to live with, to honor, to profit from, and sometimes to fight against that colossal shadow. We will explore the lives of his first 4 children with his first wife, Josephine Saenz, Michael Wayne, the dutiful eldest son who became the powerful guardian of the family business, the private daughters, Toni and Melinda, and Patrick Wayne, the son who bravely followed his father's footsteps into the treacherous world of acting. Then we will delve into the lives of his 3 children with his third wife, Pilar Pallete, who grew up at the absolute peak of his fame, Aissa Wayne, the rebellious daughter whose tell-all book shattered the myth. Ethan Wayne, the son who inherited his father's iconic looks and became the modern face of the legacy. And Marissa Wayne, the youngest daughter who remembers a softer, more loving side of the tough guy icon. To bring you this definitive saga of a Hollywood dynasty, we have consulted numerous biographies, the children's own memoirs and rare interviews, and decades of news reports that chronicled the triumphs and the turmoil of the sprawling Wayne family. This is a deep dive into the very human reality behind the ultimate American legend. Number 1, 2, 3, and 4. The first family. The children of Josephine. Before he was a global political icon, he was a hard-working rising star starting a family with his first wife, the daughter of a prominent Los Angeles family, Josephine Aissa Saenz. His first 4 children knew a different John Wayne, a man still building his legend, a father who was often away, but whose presence loomed large. They were bound by a powerful, old-fashioned sense of duty to the family name. Their story begins with the eldest son, the one groomed from the start to take over the empire, Michael Wayne. Michael Wayne, born in 1934, was the firstborn. And from a very early age, he understood that his role was one of immense, sober responsibility. While his father was out on location creating the myth of the American hero, Michael was being prepared to manage and protect it. After serving honorably in the U.S. Air Force Reserve, he went to work for his father's own production company, Batjock Productions. He started at the bottom as a production assistant on films like The Alamo, and worked his way up, eventually, becoming the producer or executive producer of many of his father's most famous later films, including the controversial Vietnam War film, The Green Berets, and westerns like Big Jake and Chisum. He was serious, intensely business-minded, and fiercely, almost ferociously protective of his father. He was the gatekeeper. After John Wayne's death from cancer in 1979, it was Michael who immediately took the reins of the vast and complex family estate. He managed the legacy with an iron fist, and most importantly, he helped found and became the chairman of the John Wayne Cancer Institute at St. John's Health Center, a world-class facility dedicated to fighting the disease that took his father. He was the dutiful son, the protector, the businessman who ensured the Wayne Empire would not only endure, but would also do good in the world. Michael passed away from heart failure in 2003, a patriarch in his own right, having fulfilled his duty to his father's name. His younger sister, Mary Antonia, Toni Wayne LaCava, born in 1936, chose a much more private life. She was a devoted daughter and sister, but largely shied away from the often brutal Hollywood spotlight, focusing instead on raising her own large family of 8 children. Her life, however, was also marked by tragedy. She passed away in 2000 at the relatively young age of 64 from lung cancer, the same disease that had plagued her father for so long, a heartbreaking echo of the family's greatest struggle. The son who did choose the spotlight was Patrick Wayne. Born in 1939, Patrick grew up on his father's film sets, and it was almost inevitable that he would fall into the family business of acting. He appeared in over 40 films, often alongside his father, in some of the most iconic movies ever made. He was the young, fresh-faced cavalry officer in John Ford's masterpieces like The Searchers and The Alamo, and he held his own in comedies like McClintock. He was a handsome, charismatic, and capable actor in his own right. But he could never escape the comparison to his legendary father. How could he? He forged his own respectable career starring in a string of popular fantasy films like Sinbad and The Eye of the Tiger and hosting television shows. But he was always first and foremost John Wayne's son. After his brother Michael's death, Patrick stepped into the role of chairman of the John Wayne Cancer Institute, continuing the family's most important philanthropic mission. He has spent his life both working in his father's shadow and honoring his father's memory through service. The youngest of the first family, Melinda Wayne Munoz, born in 1940, followed her sister Toni's lead and chose a life of deliberate privacy. She married, had a large family, and has remained a devoted but resolutely non-public member of the Wayne clan. She has always supported the family's charitable efforts, but has done so from behind the scenes. The children of the first family, born before the peak of the legend, largely understood their roles. They were the protectors and the supporters of the powerful, heroic myth their father had so carefully constructed, while the children of his first family found their own ways to live with their father's established legend. His second family, born at the absolute zenith of his fame and political influence, would have a much different and in many ways more turbulent and complicated experience. Starting with the daughter who would dare to tell all. Number 5. Aissa Wayne, the rebel daughter and the tell-all book. To the world, he was a living saint of American values, a Republican icon who stood for God, family, and country. But to his daughter Aissa Wayne, he was a much more complex and often difficult figure. How did the little girl who grew up on her father's yacht, the Wild Goose, end up writing a tell-all book that shattered the perfect heroic image of the Duke? Born in 1956, Aissa Wayne was the first child of John Wayne and his third wife, the beautiful Peruvian actress Pilar Pallete. She grew up in a world of extreme wealth and privilege at a time when her father was not just a movie star, but a political icon and a living legend. She was the apple of his eye, a beautiful daughter who experienced the very best of the Wayne lifestyle, the Newport Beach mansion, the travel, the fame, and long idyllic summers on the family's converted minesweeper yacht. But her life was also defined by her father's rigid control and his deeply traditional, old-fashioned values. In 1991, 12 years after his death, Aissa published her explosive and controversial memoir titled John Wayne, My Father. The book sent shockwaves through his legions of devoted fans. It was not a hateful book. She wrote with clear love and deep affection. But it was an honest one, and it was unflinching. She painted a portrait of a father who was generous and loving, but also deeply controlling, often emotionally distant and rigidly conservative. She wrote about his heavy drinking, his volatile temper, and his often strained and awkward relationship with his children. She revealed a man who demanded loyalty and obedience above all else. A patriarch who struggled to show vulnerability or affection and who was often deeply lonely beneath the tough exterior. She told the world that the simple, honorable hero on screen was in reality a far more complicated and difficult man. Aissa's own personal life has been tumultuous. Her high-profile and bitterly contested divorce from surgeon Thomas A. Gionis became a tabloid spectacle in the late 80s, involving shocking accusations of hired thugs, violent confrontations, and a messy custody battle. It was a drama that seemed a world away from the simple, clear-cut honor of her father's films. Through her book, Aissa complicated the myth of John Wayne. She replaced the one-dimensional hero with a complex, flawed, and ultimately more believable human being. In doing so, she asserted her own identity, refusing to be just another silent keeper of a flawless and perhaps false legend. While Aissa's book presented a complicated and critical view of their father, her younger brother would grow up to become the very embodiment of his father's perfect heroic image, taking on the role of the modern-day Duke. Number 6 and 7. Ethan and Marissa Wayne, the children of the modern legacy. One son would inherit his father's iconic looks and the immense responsibility of carrying his powerful name into the future. The youngest daughter would inherit the cherished memory of a loving, aging father. Together, Ethan and Marissa Wayne represent the final chapter of his life and the future of his carefully managed legacy. John Ethan Wayne, known to everyone as Ethan, was born in 1962. He inherited his father's rugged good looks, his athletic build, and his deep love for the outdoors. He began his career in Hollywood as a stuntman, a job that suited his tough athletic nature before moving into acting. He appeared in a number of films and TV shows, including a recurring role on the soap opera The Bold and the Beautiful and the police procedural The New Adam 12. But his most important role would come long after his acting career. Today, Ethan Wayne is the director of the John Wayne Cancer Foundation and the president of John Wayne Enterprises. He is the modern public face of the official family legacy. He manages the licensing of his father's name and image, a multi-million-dollar business that includes everything from John Wayne-branded coffee and bourbon to apparel, knives, and collectibles. He is a savvy and dedicated businessman who has carefully cultivated the heroic image his father created, ensuring its continued popularity and profitability. He is the guardian of the brand, a son who has embraced the myth and is now its chief executive, often standing in stark contrast to his sister Aissa's more complicated narrative. The youngest of all 7 children is Marissa Wayne, born in 1966. She was just 13 years old when her father passed away from stomach cancer. Because of this, her memories are of a doting older father, a man who, in his later years, battling the disease that would take his life, perhaps softened. She has largely avoided a public life, though she is active and passionate in supporting the family's cancer foundation, often hosting charity events and leading fundraising efforts. Marissa has found her own path in the world of health and fitness, creating a popular nutrition bar called Grit, a clear and clever nod to her father's most famous Oscar-winning role in True Grit. In interviews, she speaks of her father with immense, uncomplicated love, often defending his legacy against modern criticism with a daughter's fierce loyalty. She represents the personal human side of the icon, the daughter who remembers the man, not the myth. Together, Ethan and Marissa work to preserve a heroic, positive version of their father's legacy, a vision that powerfully endures to this day. Together, the 7 lives of the Wayne children create a complex mosaic of loyalty, rebellion, duty, and love. They are businessmen, actors, authors, and private citizens, each of whom has had to reckon with the colossal and controversial myth of John Wayne. They show us that behind every American legend, there is a human family in all its complicated glory. This theme of navigating the chaotic personal life of a true Hollywood icon is a powerful one we have explored before on this channel. In a previous video, we dove into the glamorous and turbulent world of Elizabeth Taylor, another larger-than-life legend whose life off-screen was every bit as dramatic as any role she ever played. We explored her 8 marriages, her incredible Oscar-winning career, and her groundbreaking activism that changed the world. You can watch that definitive story by clicking the link right here. And her children's stories of growing up in that whirlwind of paparazzi husbands and priceless jewels are just as fascinating. We are currently finishing our deep dive, Elizabeth Taylor's 4 Children, The Untold Story. To see how they navigated that incredible life, make sure you are subscribed and have hit that notification bell. You will not want to miss it.